evening and welcome to Four Guys, a Girl, and a Show. My name is JQ. With me always is Mr. Brian Isaacs,
Hey, hey.
Miss Stacy Rader,
Good evening.
and Mr. Mike Hopkins.
Howdy.
Dave's out and about doing his firefighter thing today, so he's going to skip out, but we should see him again soon. We have a pretty good show planned up for you guys today, some pretty deep talking points. I know a couple of these points, our main man Mike is going to break his silent vow, and he's chomping at the bit to get his voice heard about a couple of these topics. Just to lay it out for you guys, we're going to talk about the Django Unchained action figure dilemma or controversy, whatever adjective you want to add in there about the action figures. We're going to talk a little something about the writers, not new writers not being able to come into the new to Big Do Studios, DC and Marvel. And then we got some more comic book news coming at you about some trends and prices. So without further ado, let's go to our first topic and talk about the Django Unchained figures by NECA Toys. Let's save Mike's fired up rant for last. Let's go with Brian first in this one.
Okay, well, bottom line what's going on is somebody on Facebook complained about there was a slave action figure in the assortment for the Django Unchained action figures from NECA. I think this guy has like 70 followers on Facebook, which is pretty much nothing. But of course, the human rights activist that he is, Reverend Al Sharpton, has to get involved. He raised a big, huge stink. Next thing you know, the Weinstein brothers, people who put out the film, caved and have issued a statement saying that there will be no more Django figures coming out. Unfortunately, at this time, no one has heard anything from NECA about their view on this, and this has just turned into a major cluster mess. It's a ridiculous situation. Obviously, the actors who were in the film didn't have an issue with it, so why are so many other people having issue with it?
Apparently Jay has dropped off some technical issues. What do you think, Stacy?
Well, I think everything I read about it was the issue wasn't with the film itself. The issue was actually with the commercialization of slavery, which, I'm not saying that I agree with them, but I guess I can kind of see where they're coming from. And this is really not the first time there's been controversy with toys based on Tarantino films. It's a little different, but Lucy Liu wouldn't give permission to make an O-Ren Ishii action figure for the Kill Bill line. And even as far back as the Reservoir Dogs toys, Steve Buscemi wouldn't, he allowed them to make a Mr. Pink figure, but he wouldn't allow the gun to be packed in with the toy. It had to be packed in with another figure. I can't remember which figure, but I just remember that was like you could get a Mr. Pink, but he didn't have a gun, and that was sort of a thing. But I think that the most shameful thing in this whole thing is the secondary market has exploded, and even on Amazon, because I was a huge fan of the movie. So I was excited about Mego scale Django Unchained figures, and I didn't want the whole line. I wasn't interested I was mostly interested in Schultz because I'm a huge Christoph Waltz fan. And so I had one saved in my Amazon wish list because I think as late as, I want to say Saturday, they were still available through Amazon for their suggested retail price of $39.99. And so I thought, well, paid next week. If they're still available, I'll get one. Well, I checked today, and now NECA's no longer offering them. But with Amazon, it says used and new from $545. So there's one that's $545, one that's $566, and there's one that some idiot is trying to sell for $5,999. So I think, to me, it's I hate that they're not making the toys, but I think that the most horrible part of it is the people that have the toys that have now decided that just because they're no longer available, now they have this enormous markup, and that it's not like they only made 50 of them. It's not like an art toy where they're super limited. It's a thing where there are probably thousands of them in a warehouse somewhere, but because we can't get to them, the people that do have them feel that they have to get all the money that they can for them.
And that's a common trend when it comes up. That's been discontinued or pulled off shelves. I mean, uh, you know, name any Christmas toy back in the day that had a parental warning. I mean, this is a different, of course, different spectrum on why it got pulled. But I mean, once something gets pulled, the secondary market goes insane.
What I have a problem with is I don't, I'm Jewish for over 20 years now. I have seen come out of Japan, and I don't know what their fascination is with, but 1/12 scale Nazi figures. How am I supposed to feel? I mean, it's not just one or two. I'm talking about a huge line, and there's this entire subculture that's collecting these Nazi figures. And I'm sorry, but it's disgusting to me. And we're Sharpton with this one.
I,
Go ahead, Mike.
I've been fired up about this one, Brian. Not that I don't disagree with you, and yeah, I agree. But here's my point: they're so busy worrying about a toy. Okay, it's one thing if they had voice boxes in there and they would use the N word constantly. If you look at the toys, the female is dressed in a nice dress. The male is dressed in a nice cowboy outfit. It doesn't look like a slave. It doesn't talk like a slave. The slave owners don't talk like slave owners. It's an action figure. It's not marketed to the young. It's not in Toys R Us. You're not going to find it on the shelves at Walmart. It is an adult collectible. My biggest issue is they're so busy chasing this down. It's why are we, it's 2013. Why are we still talking black and white? Why are we still talking race and preferences and everything else? We should be above this. Where was Al Sharpton when those kids got shot at that high school? Why wasn't he out there going, let's ban guns, let's do this? Because I don't want to make this a racial thing, but if a black child had been one of the childs to die, he would have been all over it. But because it didn't happen, he doesn't care. It's a publicity stunt for him. The only thing he cares about is putting his name in the newspaper so that everybody can see that he's still around and that he's all pro-black. And again, I'm not trying to make this a racial thing. If it was, in my opinion, it brings slavery to light so that we teach our children what slavery was about. You don't hear about it in schools anymore. You don't hear about it, people don't talk about it that much. And because it was brought up in a movie, now, oh, it's a bad thing, it's a bad thing. No, it's an educational thing. Why can't we teach everybody about slavery? Why can't we say, hey, this did happen. It happened. Whether we like it or not, it happened. And I just think that it's a bandwagon Al's jumping on just to get his name out there for publicity. It's no different than anything else he's jumped on board about. As I said, it's an adult collectible. It's not a toy store. Why isn't he at Toys R Us asking them to ban Mr. Hanky, the Christmas poo that they were selling at Toys R Us, or Cartman with the anal probe? Where's he at on that? It just upsets me because
Well, please, Toys R Us is selling Walking Dead figures. I will walk into the toy store and I'm like, really? It doesn't seem
Exactly.
appropriate to me.
But they call that their adult section. If you talk to anybody at Toys R Us, they say, "Oh, well, this is our adult section." Okay, but you're still a toy store that has children coming into the toy store. So where is he on that? Why isn't he at Toys R Us picking at them, going, "Hey, you know, they're selling adult toys at a toy store for children that are under the age." You know, he should be worrying about educational system. He should be worrying about other things, not some toy that's being sold to adults.
Mike, I agree. I mean, we should be. It's 2013. I mean, we are so far beyond where we were, but we'll never ever truly get there if we keep worrying about things like that. You know, oh my gosh, this toy does this. Oh my gosh, this movie said that. Oh my gosh, this song said this. It's like the issues are being hidden by all this pettiness. You know, I didn't see the movie yet. Like I'm probably gonna go see it tomorrow because I have no school and no other job to work tomorrow. So I'll go see the movie and be able to make my own determination. But everybody I've spoken to has not said one bad thing about this flick. They said that, you know what, Jamie Foxx did an awesome job. Tarantino's direction was great. You know, to me, Jamie Foxx was a lead. He was a powerful leading man in this movie. So if anything, it should be the direct opposite of what people are complaining about because this guy was the hero of the movie, was he not? I mean, Stacey, you saw it. Was he the hero of the movie?
Yeah, he was.
So I mean, I don't understand the complaints. He was the badass of the movie. Let it go. It's for entertainment purposes. And if we dwell on, you know, for example, Tarantino was a white guy. He directed this. So Tarantino had to approve of all the language in the movie. Well, you know what? So what? It's a movie. If you don't like it, don't go see it. That's my 2 cents on it.
I want to reiterate the gentleman that started the whole thing, Najee Ali, said he went and saw the movie and he liked the movie. He just didn't agree with the toys, but nobody can say why they don't agree with the toys. They all say, oh, well, it promotes slavery. How? How does it promote slavery? I don't understand why they think it does.
The actual quote was that he said it trivializes slavery. Not that it promotes it, but it trivializes it. Making toys that are slaves trivializes it. And again, I'm not saying I totally agree with him, but I can see where he's coming from. To Brian's point, that's, I mean, how the Jewish community would feel about Nazi toys. I mean, the only problem that I had with the quote, and I'm looking at the quote right now, is that he says something about that they didn't make toys based on Inglourious Bastards, which they actually did. Sideshow partnered with Hot Toys to make a Hans Landa and an Aldo Rain. So there was a little bit of incorrect information there, but...
Well, Stacy, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you this. When you think of slavery, I'm sorry, I missed... Wrong question. In the movie, did he free his... spoiler alert, nobody saying... But did he free his wife from slavery?
I can't answer that question without spoiling something for people who haven't seen the movie.
But Django himself was a freed slave, correct?
Yes, he was.
Okay. So... I hear what you're saying, but how does that, as you said, how does that make trivial slavery if he wasn't actually a slave? If he was free?
Because one of the toys in the line is Steven. It was the character that Samuel L. Jackson plays, and he was a slave. A house slave, to be exact.
Okay,
well, let's rewind the clock a little bit. And I mean, this movie doesn't really hold that much water in the entertainment community, but there was a lot of things talked about that could have gone wrong. And I don't know if my history serves me right, but I mean, Wild Wild West with Will Smith was basically a watered down version. If you think about it, I mean, he was a freed slave who was a cowboy. He became one of the, you know, in that movie, one of the first Secret Service members. I mean,
Bad example.
But think about it though. I mean, they were talking about, I mean, how many racial slurs were thrown in that movie toward Will Smith's character? I don't remember anything being said about that.
There actually wasn't that many racial slurs in Wild Wild West. It was so watered down, it wasn't even funny. The worst word that was used was boy. That was about it. While Tarantino now holds the record for the amount of using the N-word in a film, which I think was 109 times.
Well, did anybody bring up the fact that back in the early 90s was a movie called Friday, which was written by Ice Cube, that was making light of an everyday Friday in the ghetto, but because he's a black guy, that was okay for him to make that.
Well, think of all the 90s movies, you know, Boys in the Hood, Juice. I mean, name all of those. I mean, and they were gritty, and the word was used very willingly and not held back at all. I mean,
But that's a double standard you're gonna constantly find. It's a double standard that keeps happening. You know, the argument of, well, you know, we can say it because we're talking about ourselves. They can't say it because it's a racial insult, and this is an ongoing argument with the same stupid thing over a word, and it's not a good word. But you know what? I've heard a lot worse.
it's going to
Well,
be
I think,
the...
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think on that, if memory serves, I've read a few articles about this. I don't think that most of Hollywood had a problem with the use of the N-word, because I think Tarantino, and I think he defended himself very well, he said that's the word they would have used. And so there's that. But the other thing you have to consider is Tarantino is a filmmaker. His favorite genre to pay homage to is grindhouse and exploitation, and blaxploitation films are a big part of that. And you know, so yes, Django Unchained is a film that's about a freed slave, but it's a movie about that's turned up to 11 in the realm of spaghetti westerns and 70s grindhouse films. So of course it's going to be, so everything is going to be elevated and everything is going to be caricatures almost. But that's not, I mean, it's not to say that he's not a serious filmmaker, because I think he really is, and he knows his film, and I think he does very well with that. But he himself would tell you he's not out to make the next Amistad or serious film about the horrors of slavery. He's going to show you sort of the samurai movie version of what happens to a guy who's a freed slave and goes through all of these things. So, I mean, I think that's something to think about when you're thinking about kind of how people perceive this film.
It's funny,
Well,
as you're talking about it, Stacey, the only thing that's jumping in my mind is Blazing Saddles. It's just, it's like, seems like, from the way you're explaining it to me, it just kind of seems like a Blazing Saddles on crack without the humor. It's just...
well, but when you went in to watch the movie, Stacy, what were you, I mean, before all this happened, what were you expecting? I seeing the commercials and stuff, I'm expecting a good Quentin Tarantino cowboy movie is what I'm expecting. I'm not going in there thinking, oh, it's exploiting slaves or, you know, it's his typical grindhouse movie to me.
Well, maybe, and that's what it is. And I think, at least what I've read of people, I mean, I know that Spike Lee and some in that camp did have some issues with it, but by and large, and certainly when we're talking about Ali, who had issues with the toys, he didn't have an issue with the movie, and most people in Hollywood didn't have an issue with it. And if it were something that was so controversial, I mean, I think let me step back a second. I think there is a reason that it could be considered controversial, but you have to understand Tarantino, and you have to, and Tarantino is my favorite director, so of course I'm gonna, unless he just does something completely bonkers, I'm going to side with him and know that kind of there's a method to what seems like madness sometimes. But he set out to make a grindhouse cowboy movie, and that's what he did. And it's a great film, and I hope the controversy drives people into the theaters to see it, because it's already made a ton of money. Maybe because of the controversy, but also because it's a really great film. I mean, it really is. It's just, there is nothing I can say about that film that is negative. I loved it, and I hope I get to go see it again before it leaves the theaters.
I think what Al Sharpton and Ali are doing is having a negative effect on the toys themselves, because you're driving up the market by pushing for them to remove the toys. You're putting that money into somebody else's hands, and where they're going on eBay for $900, or somebody's trying to get $900 to take advantage of this situation. And I think that's the wrong message you want to get across to people, is not to make money off of it, but to bring to light the fact that you disagree with the slavery aspect of it. And that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, I think something I read, I can't remember who wrote it, but somebody made the comment about what they've done now is they've taken these toys that are based on, characters that are slaves, and put them on eBay, where they go to the highest bidder. So there's a little bit of irony going on there that's kind of interesting. But the main thing that I get out of this is, I wanted that toy. I don't care now. I'm like, man, whatever. But I hope it doesn't mean that NECA says, well, we were going to make Mego scale toys based on Inglourious Bastards or Kill Bill or Pulp Fiction, and then they're like, we don't want to do that now. Because I'm telling you, NECA, if anybody from NECA is listening, if you get the license to Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction and you make Mego scale toys, that is a license to print money in my book. So do it, because it's awesome.
Yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, it comes down to being, shady politics, and hopefully NECA doesn't bend and fold, but to the whims of the silliness of what it is. But we'll see at the end. Well, let's pick up and move on to our next topic. And this topic has to do with the big two and their inability to bring on new writers. Brian, you want to expand on this?
This has kind of been an ongoing thing, at least I've noticed. There is a major hesitancy from the big two to actually bring in new writing talent for some reason or another. If you go to anything like New York Comic Con or San Diego, or even if you look at their websites, they're always asking for submission from artists, but never from writers. And there are a ton of people out there that want to write, but just, they never get the chance because they refuse to, give these people a sheet. They don't even have anything to, send your submission to. There's nothing like the regular publishing industry where you can submit it to an agent or stuff. It's just the big two just refuse to bring on new writers unless you bring up you're able to do something independent, and even then it's not even guaranteed.
Well, I mean, you look at the writers that get cycled through DC and Marvel, and we've seen we know how you feel about Morrison, and we're seeing Johns kind of go through. He was doing really good stuff, and now he's starting to get that godlike mentality to him, where his writing is kind of going down a little bit. But then at the end of the day, you look what happened to Gail Simone, where she gets a email or a tweet or a text saying that she has no longer work for DC, and then the fan base goes ape shit, and all of a sudden she's back on a couple of days later. So the bending and folding of the companies that retain certain people. Um, you know, are there stories to be written out there that haven't been told? My God, yes. But I mean, if you notice, I mean, I know Brian, we've talked about this in depth off the air. The recycling of stories. People were all outraged about the whole mind swap thing, but then we discussed that it actually happened before. The AVX thing. The Avengers and X-Men have fought years before, but this is a different way of telling a story. So I mean, it's just the recycling of the writing. You know, it gets to a point where do you keep reading a book because they're gonna tell it with a different twist, or they're gonna keep the story the same, or pay homage to it, or what? But I mean, there are writers out there, very talented writers. I mean, we talked to when we talked to Fred Van Lent. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing his take on G.I. Joe, but that's an independent label. Why won't they let him write another story for Marvel? Why did they let him go to a different company? I mean, that's the thing. You have someone talented, you should keep them in your stable.
But the other thing is, this like, then these writers, like you said, they build up the ego, they got a god complex, then they stretch them out so thin that their stuff sucks. I mean, look at Bendis, for an example. How many books was the man on before? 4 or 5 for a month? And quite honestly,
so.
they all sucked. They really did. Of course, the mindless masses will probably argue with me, saying, "Oh, it's the greatest thing they ever read." Well, they're idiots. What do they know? Read something new, you morons. But it's just, his stuff was crap. It really was. His ego got in the way. He thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, they aren't that good. They really aren't that good. And there is a lot of raw, untapped talent that is trying to get in there, that is getting awards. We're talking about, the Eisners, the Harveys. They're getting, recognition among their peers about being these great writers, and yet the big two still won't hire them. There's something wrong with that.
I mean, I love when I walk down a convention floor. You always see an artist alley, a couple artists who are like unknowns, but then with them are someone who does writing. Oh, hey, we did this book together, and so on and so forth. And if you actually flip through it, it's 9 times out of 10 you're gonna find a pretty good book out of the mix there. If you actually read these little 10, 12 page quick shots they got printed up for the cons. But yes, I mean, Brian, I agree. There's so many people out there who can tell a good story, and why we're not getting the story told is unknown to me, and it's frustrating. I mean, going back to John's, his writing on Green Lantern pre Flashpoint was amazing. Then we got the New 52, and when that timeline got skewed, he got that God complex, as you put it, and it's kind of like
He
I'm
got
still.
he got that god complex before.
Yeah, but I still enjoy the stories though.
His Green Lantern was good, but on the second run of Just Society, that's where his ego really started to show. He thought he could do no wrong, which is, of course, one of the reasons why I would like to see Stargirl die a very, very painfully death and meaningless. I think they need to teach the man a lesson. I think, something very brutal but very stupid needs to happen to her. And something very unheroic. Just to shut him up. Yes, I know it's based on his sister. And that's exactly why she needs to die.
So
Evil Brian.
Yeah, really. So here's a question, though. What are these? I mean, are there? I'm sure there are, but these people that you see at conventions that are with an artist and they've got their own book, do they even want to write for the big two? I mean, I know there are people who do, but I'm thinking of my friends in the industry who write their own books and they have their own creator own thing going on. they don't really have a desire to write for the big two. So there's that. The other question is, and I think, far be it from, I'm the indie sweetheart and I'm asking this question, but why would the big two take a chance on somebody when they've got somebody like Jeff Johns in their stable that they know that people will follow blindly? Gail Simone's another one. I mean, obviously, I'm not a huge fan of Gail Simone as a writer. I think she's funny on Twitter, and that's about it. Um, and I just don't think her books are that good, and yet there's this huge following. So if DC's looking at an unknown that doesn't have the numbers to back him up, and Gail Simone that they know, well, if Gail Simone's name on this is on this book, people are going to buy it no matter if it's great or if she just wrote her grocery list on 22 pages, then why would they try somebody new? I'm not saying it's good practice, but in a business sense, it kind of is.
In a business sense, it completely makes sense, but it's just like, how is a writer supposed to get a shot if no one's ever going to give him a chance?
I mean, there's all these little side stories. I mean, most of the books now have a little sub story in there. I mean, they can give an up and coming person a chance on a side story. I mean, and say, hey, who knows? I mean, if that's how most artists probably got started was, hey, they were able to draw a couple pages here or a cover here, and now they're big time, But it leads you to believe, where is the industry going? I mean, if they want to keep the same people, they're going to spread them so thin, they're going to get burnt out. And like you said, I mean, there's only so many things you can write. I mean, an artist will take a couple books, do a couple runs, then they'll take a break and then come back. Look at Capullo. I mean, he's been drawing Batman for a while now, but after Death of a Family, he's taking, I think, a 1 or 2 book break and then going back to it again. But I mean, writers, at some point, you want to stick with your character. I understand that. And, if John's baby is Green Lantern or whatever it may be, they want to stick with it. But, at some point, you have to take a little bit of a break and say to yourself, keep the character fresh.
But here's the thing. It's just like, that's the mentality. Green Lantern isn't John's baby. It never has been. It never will be. There was a ton of writers who did a lot better that they refused to rehire because of their age. Hell, they got rid of Ron Mars, the guy who, I don't know, who made Kyle a household name. They completely shut him out and then took what he created from scratch, and shut him out and gave it to Johns, and Johns just completely screwed with it and just made it worse.
Jason, and you and I have talked about the book I've been working on, and yeah. Once it's done, I have an artist to draw it, and I am considering shopping it, but DC or Marvel never popped in my head to go to because I just don't feel like they want new stuff. They want to stick with the same characters, even though I think it'll be something different that a lot of people haven't seen lately. I just wouldn't even consider it because, as Brian has said, they don't look at new writers, and that's my strong suit. I don't draw. I can't draw. I can draw 2 sticks, put them together, and it looks like a stick figure. That's it. But I would never attempt to go to DC or Marvel just for the simple fact that I just don't want to feel like I got to fight to get heard.
Well, I mean, and like I said, Stacy has turned me on to a lot of these independent books. And yes, I mean, reading some of these independent stories I've read is been entertaining. I mean, it's a nice little break and breath of fresh air. I mean, reading Fanboys versus Zombies and, the Wicked Wild West of Oz, stuff that, is different to me is a breath of fresh air from, reading about my favorite characters. And yes, I mean, that's going to probably be your best bet, bro, when you do shop this around, is to go to an independent label.
Or self-publish.
Oh, yeah, or self-publish. There's ways to do that as well. But, I mean, it's it's heartbreaking that with all these talented people out there. I mean, there's probably a couple listening right now who've written books or good articles. I mean, I know on Pendragon's Prose, I read tons of good articles written by people who could probably write a good comic book too.
I mean, I can name 10 people off the top of my head that just can't seem to get a shot with either DC or Marvel that have been around in the industry for years. For one reason or another, they don't want to give them a shot. I mean, look at one of the most, Terry Moore of Strangers in Paradise fame. He can't seem to get a shot at either of the big two. He's had a couple one-off assignments, but for some reason they won't give him a book to do.
And I hate to go back to it, but another good book that's an independent is done by Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. And I love the book they do, and it's not one of the big two.
Hack and Slash?
Actually, it's Revival.
Yeah.
It's and I tried to bring it to light to other people, and of course I got it's another zombie book. No, it's a twist on zombies that needed to be done that hasn't been touched on yet. It's still something different. It is, because zombies are popular right now. Everybody's going, oh, well, it's another zombie story. I understand that, but it's a twist on it. And if you really read it and understood, or if you read it, not necessarily understood it, but if you read it, you would see and understand what I'm talking about, that it's not your typical, zombie, I eat brains kind of characters.
Technically, there are no more original ideas. Everything's just a variation on a theme.
I agree. There's
some really good variations out there, though. Some really good ones.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But, so what Mike is saying, and I totally agree with him, is don't read the big two. Read independent books. I'm always a fan of that. No, but the one person I was thinking of that actually is sort of an exception is Jeff Lemire, who is, he did his own stuff, the Essex County, which if anybody listening, if you've never read Essex County, I suggest go to your comic shop now, pick it up. You'll read it in one sitting. It is not, it's not a superhero book. It's not, it's a kind of it's independent, but it's such a good story, and it's heartbreaking, and it's so good. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of Jeff Lemire. But then he kind of did some stuff with Vertigo and with Sweet Tooth, and then now he's writing Animal Man, Frankenstein, Agent of Shade. He may be writing another book. So they've tasked him with some pretty big things, but he was, up until a couple of years ago, was, strictly an indie guy. So he's one guy who's made it into the big two, and incidentally is one of the few New 52 books I actually read. So that's how you get your indie readers, is you get your indie artists and your indie writers, and because most of us are pretty artist and writer loyal. So if you get them on a big two book, chances are people will buy them.
It still goes back to, what does it take to break into the big two? If they're not giving anybody a chance, why don't they accept submissions from writers? Who knows who's out there who can do a better job? Give somebody a shot, for God's sake.
On Brian's note, I know his feelings about Jeff Johns, and I tend to agree to a certain point. I always feel like Jeff Johns does a series such as Blackest Night or Flashpoint, he starts strong, but then he ends up fizzling out towards the end. And I like him as a writer, and he's one of my favorite, but I'm starting to see what Brian is talking about, that his stories just don't stay consistently good.
His ego's gone to his head. You read his early stuff, and it's pretty good stuff. But his Flash run is still one of my favorite runs. And but his ego started to get in the way. He was called the Wonder Boy, and he assumes he is. When he took over JSA was a solid title with a good lead in it, and he took it over, and of course he bumped his dead sister's character on there and knocked off the great lead, who was, Sand, for no reason. And, he does what he wants. And it's annoying. And, don't even get me started on Morrison. He's so freaking out there. It's not even funny. But I mean, and then you got writers who just stick to one thing and one thing only. And they're kind of under the radar. I mean, Brubaker was kind of under the radar. He didn't take on more than he could handle. The most amount of time, he took on 2 books, and one started to suffer while the other one flourished. But, that's still not so bad like some other writers. But he kind of just stays under the radar.
Yeah, hopefully we can get some new blood in there and kind of revive some of these stories. I mean, like I said, I'm enjoying, the current run on Batman. I'm enjoying Snyder's work. I mean, I enjoy John's work. I mean, some of it gets a little bit sometimes, but for the most part, I'm more 90%. I like it, but I do like to see some of these independent guys, kind of, if you want to call the independent label the AAA, kind of have them come up to the majors. Even though some of these indie books are written a lot better, but I will agree with Stacey on that too. But well, sticking with the comic book genre, let's talk about the price hikes. We had this huge campaign by DC when New 52 came out, was drawing the line at $2.99 and all that stuff. Then a couple books came out and they were $3.99 or $4.99. Like, wait, I thought it was all $2.99. And anniversary books or annuals, because they were a little bit thicker, got like $1 or $2 price hike. Let's rewind back to Action Comics number 900, where it was a $5.99 or $6 book. We'll say that. But the trend continues. Amazing Spider-Man 700, that book we talked so openly about a few weeks ago. That was a $7.99 book. $7.99, $8 for a comic book. And that trend seems to continue, where we're going to have Detective Comics 19 or 900 per se is solicited to be a $7.99 book as well. So with this trend of significant titles, i.e. the 700, the 900, whatever you want to call it, or anniversary or whatever major issues, is this going to be a trend? Are we going to see major issues skyrocket in price to an $8 book? I mean, in my opinion, yeah, I'm going to complain about an $8 comic book, but am I going to get Detective Comics number 19? Yes, I am, and yes, I know it's feeding the beast and it's not helping the cause, but I would not miss an issue of my favorite character. Am I going to turn around and sell that book on Evil Bay for a scalper's price? No, it's my book. I'm going to keep it. But that's the trend. I mean, right now, if you all notice your DC books this week, all your DC books for January and February were $3.99, not $2.99. They were $3.99. So look at your prices and go, I didn't notice that, because we're so used to buying our books at a certain price. You don't look at those prices anymore. But yes, DC's New 52 books went to $3.99 for most of the titles. At least all my titles were this month. Marvel's been at that $3.99 mark, right, Brian, for a while now?
Yes.
So, I mean, I know when I buy all the X-Men, it's probably the only new Marvel Now title I stayed true is All New X-Men. It's $3.99 as well. So, what do you think about that, Brian? The price hike in comics.
Unfortunately, I can kind of understand it just due to the price of publishing to a degree. If it was just the printed material being at $7.99, I could accept that. But when you have the digital copy at $7.99, where there's nothing being printed, where's the money going to? It's not going to the story, and it's not going to the art. It's corporate greed. I don't know what else to say. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm still of the old school where I remember seeing the lovely little sticker in the Marvel comics is now only at 25 cents. So I'm showing my age.
I remember when comics were only 25 cents.
Those were the days.
We had to walk uphill both ways to go get one.
No, but I agree, Brian. I mean, you know, whether it be 25 cents, 35 cents, $1.50, I mean, I can go back and say I remember buying a couple books when they were $1.50, you know, then they kept going up. I mean, like anything, everything's going to raise in price. You know, like you said, the price of publishing. Yes, I understand that. I mean, it's even going in the realm of action figures. We talked about this many times about action figures. You know, $13 for a Marvel Legend when it first came out. Now,
but again, it doesn't explain why is the digital copy $7.99.
no, I agree. I mean, there should be no excuse for that. I mean,
yeah, no, and the way publishing works is it depends. Your price is depending on so many factors. You know, one of it is obviously the printing run. Why are so many, you know, as we go back to the indie publishers, why are they able to keep the line at $3.99? And
because there's no overhead costs.
But no, there is overhead cost because they're still paying for it, and they're paying a lot more because they got to pay for a lower print run. We're talking Spider-Man here. We're not talking like Bob's superhero. We're talking Spider-Man. There's no reason for this book to be close to $8, and then a Batman book for $8, especially with the fact that DC's trend with this is, you know, with their anniversary issues has been, you know, one original story and then 4 reprints. That's their trend. So why are they charging $8 for reprints?
Because they can, and people are going to do it. People like me are dumb.
You know, that's the pathetic part.
I mean, I'll call myself dumb.
I think for me, it's one of those things where, you know, when they're $2.99 or $3.99, if it's a character I like, I'll keep following it, even if the story is kind of okay. But they go much higher than that with the big two. If I don't like the story, I'm not going to buy it. I'll just drop it. And, you know, I've done that. I actually did that with Fables. I've read Fables since the beginning, and I recently dropped it because I was paying $3.99 for a book that I wasn't really reading. Because it was, I mean, it's still okay. It's still pretty good, but I don't have room in my budget for pretty good, even if I have every other issue of the comic. I don't. There are two things working there. One, you know, I only want to buy books that I'm really excited about reading. And 2, there's so much new stuff coming out in the indie world that, you know, that I may like better. I buy a lot of number ones of things that, you know, if it's an artist I care about or a writer I care about or something that I've just read about in previews and said, hey, sounds pretty awesome. I'll spend the $3.99 on that. But then if it's not good, then I won't keep buying it. So the same, to me, the same should be true for the big two. You know, if it's, I mean, if your favorite character, if you want every comic that they're in, that's your prerogative. But I'm saying for me as a collector, I only want stories that are good. And if they're not good, I don't keep them. I take them back to the store and trade them in for store credit so that the guy that runs my comic shop can put them back on the shelf for people who want to read them, because I don't care about having every issue of Swamp Thing. I care about I kept the annual because Becky Cloonan did art in it. And, you know, that's just, the price hikes have really changed the way that I behave as a collector, and I imagine that I'm not the only one.
No, you're not.
No, you're not, Stacey. No, you're not.
But the biggest irony is with the big two, you shell that out. These blind people are shelling out $8 for Amazing Spider-Man, when in about a month it'll be compiled with 5 other issues into a trade for $20. There's your value right there. Okay.
Oh yeah, totally.
I mean that's the annoying part.
And going back to the independents, you know, I don't see many books over 3.99. I mean, every now and then you'll see like Lock and Key will come out with a thicker book, you know, almost like a trade paperback, but not, and that's like $6. You know, the Turtles classics are like a little thicker, like $6. You know, it's one of those things where you're getting, like I said, a good story, pretty good art, and you know, for a good price. But if they keep going up, Stacy's right. People aren't going to want to buy them. And you know, I was talking with Steve Scott about this, and he thinks that eventually it's going to go to all trades. Like, you know, it's going to be a digital world where comics are going to be on a digital market, and then every now and then, after 5 issues, the trade's going to come out.
It wouldn't shock me. I mean, it's, you know, the big two, because I get the PR releases all the time. They want loyalty from the comic book shops, but they're not willing to show that same type of loyalty.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point I was going to make, Brian. I was going to say, I think at this point you're just hurting your retailers because, you know, people are going to go into the shop and they're going to want to hear about Spider-Man 700, but they don't want to shell out $7.99, so they're either going to pirate it digitally or they're going to do what I'll admit I did. I stood in the comic shop and flipped through it and skimmed it and
Yeah,
didn't buy it. And I felt kind of bad about doing it, but then at the same time, I'm like, I like Spider-Man, but I don't like him $7.99.
And they didn't say, "Hey, lady, it's not a library."
No.
That's what I say to people. It's not a library, bro. I gotta go.
see,
I'm a really fast reader. I can make it look like I'm just flipping through a comic. So he may not have known I was reading it.
but
now he does.
there are a lot of comic book places that don't say things like that allow you to read them. I mean, hell, it's just a lot of the push. There was a large push a while back when, you know, bookstores were popular, that, you know, all story arcs are only going to be 4 issues long. So this way they could come out and trade and people could go buy them in a bookstore. Well, that kind of backfired on them. And, you know, they didn't sell that well. People were going to books and the bookstores. Bookstores were closing left and right. And it's either that or why bother buying anything if you can have your coffee and stay there all day and just read everything? It's just, the bookstores have been like non-existent, and it's just I don't understand why they really want to hurt their fan base.
I mean, and the thing is, and comic book stores are folding nationwide. They're not. I mean, the brick and mortar store. I mean, you make your money on the Wednesday books. You don't make your money on the sideshows and the toys and the T-shirts. You make your money in your weekly books, and if the books don't come on time, or if the stories are crap, or if they're short runs, or whatever you want to call it, or high priced, or they're not going to sell. I mean, it's just, and that's a sad reality. I mean, you know, working where I work part time, it's almost the fact where, you know, there's weeks when we look at each other after we do the polls and go, man, it's going to be a shitty week, because we know it's going to, at the end of the day, it's going to, we're not going to make that much money on our Wednesday when we don't have that many books come out. I mean, when, you know, you get a $7.99 book, the shop has so much money wrapped up into that book. I mean, the retailer's cost on that book still is high, even though they're not charging $7.99 for each book. It's still a high, you know, purchase price to have those books in stock. So I mean, it's not saying that that book wasn't going to sell out. There was so much hype and controversy around that book. We knew the book was going to sell. But the fact of the matter is, I look at our back issues and go, man, we bought all these books and no one's buying them. Like the Marvel Now stuff, you know, people who were, you know, say reading Cap, you know, half the subscriptions dropped off after Brubaker left. So it's like, you know, the brick and mortar stores are hurting with these price hikes, and so are the consumers, because the dollar's not stretched that very far anymore.
It's the way it is. It's unfortunately it's the ugly trend that we are seeing, and it doesn't seem like the publishers don't. They act like they care, but they don't.
Well, I can tell. I can tell you just from the price hike, I'm going to be dropping some more books because I can't afford to pay $4 a book.
No, especially when you have a lot of the Marvel Now titles are bi-weekly. I mean, bi-monthly, sorry. All new X-Men's bi-monthly. I mean, Thunderbolt, I think, is bi-monthly. So, I mean, when you have a book that's a bi-monthly book at $4.99 or $4 a book, I mean, that's expensive. I mean, when you have to collect a story arc that's now $4 a book, and there's 8 books in the story arc, because it's not just Batman. You gotta buy Batwing, Batwoman. It ties up everyone at the end.
It adds up quick.
That's why the companies keep pushing these crossovers. It's, unfortunately, we're fans. We don't think like consumers, and we keep forgetting this is a business. It's the bottom line.
Yep.
But we can change it. We can do it. Be a fan, but be a smart fan. If you don't like something that a company's doing, don't buy it. Don't be a sheep. Just say no. Just say no.
When it comes to Batman, I'll say bah, bah.
Well,
the problem.
if you're gonna, all I have to say, if you're gonna be a sheep, then please just don't go on the internet and bitch and moan about it. We don't care. Just don't buy it. Just shut up.
Like I said, I'll bitch about some things, but Batman I can't. That's my boy. We talk on the weekends.
Fair enough.
All right, guys. Well, that's our show for this week. Hope you all enjoyed it. We will see you next week. We'll have some pretty cool topics and maybe even a special guest for you guys. We'll see. Who knows what the world will bring us. If I talk to Batman, I'll see if he'll come on too. But for Stacy, Brian, Michael, myself, and Dave, have a good night.